the United Nations World Food Program. Ladies and gentlemen, let us all welcome Mr. Praveen Agrawal.
Honorable Undersecretary Honrorio Ascueta, Undersecretary for National Defense. Honorable Undersecretary Natalio Escarma III, Undersecretary for Defense Operations. Assistant Secretary Bernadette Fernandez, Office of the United Nations and International Organizations, DFA. Assistant Secretary Esther Aldana, Assistant Secretary for Finance and Controllership in DILG. Major General Carlito Galvez, Deputy Chief of Staff for Operations. And Director Noel Lazaros Vargas, Director for Plans, Police National Force. Magandang umaga. I have the honor and privilege to represent today Mr. Ola Almgren, the resident coordinator, who unfortunately could not be here today for being outside the country. And it is equally an honor for the World Food Program to be part of this ceremony. So, thank you very much. Just 2 years ago, we marked the centennial of the First World War. In the last 100 years, we have suffered a Second World War. Genocides, domestic conflicts, spilling across national boundaries, and more crimes against humanity than our collective conscience can bear. United Nations Secretary General Ban Ki-moon has said that peace is one of humanity's most precious needs. Sadly, it would seem that people could always find a reason to go to war. While it takes every effort for people to make peace, people rightly tremble at the approach of war. But there are men and women who, rather than fleeing danger, stand in the breach left by the crumbling society, not to fight, but to keep civilians safe from the crossfire. These men and women are our United Nations peacekeepers, the modern-day heroes that we have come to honor here today. Over the past, the Blue Helmets deployed across 16 peacekeeping operations around the world have saved countless lives, advanced peace, and inspired hope. In South Sudan, more than 200,000 civilians who feared for their lives sought shelter at UN bases. In the Central African Republic, peacekeepers successfully supported landmark presidential and legislative elections that have set the once deep troubled country on a path to peace and stability. Peacekeepers have confronted armed groups in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo and disarmed ex-combatants. In Mali, people have suffered grave losses that have not deterred them from implementing their mandate. Just as a side note, unfortunately last night, early this morning, we lost a peacekeeper there in Mali. In Haiti, UN police and civilian experts have helped to mitigate gang violence. When fears of Ebola spread around the world, peacekeepers in Liberia provided security as international experts contained the spread of the virus. In many countries, UN mine action personnel have transformed danger zones littered with landmines and explosive remnants of war, including cluster munitions, into areas that can be used for schools, hospitals, and farms. As the size, complexity, and the accomplishments of peacekeepers have grown, unfortunately, so have the risks. Before the millennium, about 36 peacekeepers lost their lives each year Now that figure has spiked on average to 120. Last year, the list of fallen numbered 128. These peacekeepers came from 49 countries, hailing from the ranks of military, police, international civil servants, UN volunteers, and national staff. They had vastly different backgrounds, but all shared heroism and the belief that UN peacekeeping is and must remain a global force for good. Notwithstanding the reverses it has suffered, the UN peacekeeping retains the world's overwhelming confidence, as reflected in the massive growth in recent years, in terms of both numbers and complexity. 15 years ago, the UN had fewer than 40,000 military and police personnel. Today, more than 105,000 uniformed personnel from 124 countries and police contributing countries serve under the blue flag, along with 18,000 international and national civilian staff and UN volunteers. The Philippines is one of UN's most reliable partners in helping to keep the peace in many places in the world. As was said earlier, it was in 1963 when the first Philippine contingent came to the aid of a UN peacekeeping mission. In February '63, the Philippine Air Force contingent carried Filipino combat pilots to the Congo to help maintain territorial integrity and political independence of the Congo. The Filipino combat pilots distinguished themselves as the fastest in Southeast Asia and came to be known as Limbas Squadron. Limbas being the Filipino term for the keenest sighted hawk. Since then, Philippine contingents from the armed forces of the Philippines and the Philippine National Police have made their mark in over 20 UN peacekeeping missions around the world. Amongst the most highly decorated Filipino UN peacekeepers were Lieutenant General Jaime S. De Los Santos, the first Filipino force commander of a UN peacekeeping operation. General Rodolfo A. Tor, the first Filipino police commissioner of the UN mission, and Major General Natalio C. Escalma, head of mission and force commander of the UN disengagement forces in the Golan Heights. Talking of UNDOF, who among us cannot forget the greatest escape orchestrated by Filipino peacekeepers in the Golan Heights in August 2014? At that time, these incredibly courageous Filipinos refused to surrender to the Syrian rebels that had pinned them down in the UN-patrolled buffer zone between Syria and Israel. And the reminiscent of some of the inspired war movie, continued to fight until they ran out of ammunition, before finally managing to slip away under the cover of night. Before this incident, Filipino UNDAP personnel had been abducted, first in March 2013, and again in May of the same year. Any government that has had to deal with the abduction of its citizens twice in less than 3 months would have been justifiably outraged. And so do all it can to prevent the reoccurrence of such an incident. As the then Foreign Affairs Secretary, Albert Del Rosario, had said during the second abduction, the risk to Filipino peacekeeping personnel in the Golan Heights has gone beyond tolerable limits. Indeed, no UN peacekeepers should have to suffer the fate of a combatant when he or she is prevented from defending him or herself in a way a combatant is entitled to do so. It is therefore a mark of Philippine government's high-mindedness that it has resisted the urge to pull out its people from the Golan Heights and from other missions areas, and decided to continue to honor its international commitment to keeping the peace. It is an acknowledgement by this government of its belief that peace, even beyond its borders, is still a battle worth fighting. UN Peacekeepers are the perfect symbol of the UN as an intercessor for peace everywhere, whose loyalty is not to any country, race, religion, or dogma. Its neutrality and its independence give the UN its moral courage to stand in the chasm created by warring countries and to maintain its benign presence until peace can be brokered. UN Peacekeepers are at the forefront of this global peace mission. As we observe the International Day of UN Peacekeepers, allow me to borrow the words of Theophilus, who spoke of courage and bravery in battle. For the whole earth is a tomb of famous men. Not only are they commemorated by columns and inscriptions in their own countries, but in foreign lands, where there dwells also unwritten memorials to them, graven not in stone, but in the heart of men. For courage is freedom, freedom is happiness, and both outweigh the perils of war. I wish us all a meaningful commemoration of this Day of UN Peacekeepers. Thank you and good morning.
Thank you.